Hello everyone, this is Zflex and welcome back to another A Producer's Approach video. In this video, we're going to be looking at Au5 song Eden featuring Danyka Nadeau. So if you haven't watched my videos in the past, I basically break down these videos into three separate sections. I have an intro backstory section, breakdown analysis section, then lastly an outro section. So this song Eden by Au5 is one of the songs that highly inspired my song and collaboration with Eccentric called Lost Without You. That song is my one and only Complextro song. Eccentric is a genius at making Complextro, but when we were starting to make that song, the concept of that song came from Eden, because Eden had just come out right when we started producing and collaborating on that song. And I loved Eden so much because in this period in 2019, had not heard Complextro within this style for a very, very long time. Like, it's very rare you hear an electro or Complextro song of this nature, even today and, currently. So in 2019, like, this was like the first kind of old school Au5 electro song that I've heard. And I was like, whoa, this is really good. And just the whole structure of the song is basically what we used to make Lost Without You. Just like the sounds, just the structure of how the song plays out, and just the overall atmosphere and direction of the song was pretty much based off Eden, a little bit off Nova as well, as I mentioned in a previous video. But Eden is pretty much the song that solidified that style for Lost Without You. And in this period of time, Au5 had just come back onto Monstercat. He was off of Monstercat, or hadn't released in like 3-4 years prior to, I think, 2019. I think that might have been his comeback, or maybe late 2018. Prior to that, he hadn't released music for quite a while on Monstercat, and then he finally came back with a couple dubstep songs, and then Eden, which I did not expect. And this is probably one of his better releases on Monstercat. Like, he has a ton that are really good, but Eden is just, I don't know, to me it's so good, so inspirational, just kind of nostalgic in terms of listening to the song and how it kind of played a huge factor with Eccentric and I making our song Lost Without You. So Danyka Nadeau, seasoned Monstercat artist. There used to be the joke that all the songs were sung by Danyka Nadeau, so she would be like the artist, and the song name and the featured artist. So Danyka Nadeau, Danyka, and then featuring Danyka Nadeau, a Danyka Nadeau release. I used to see those comments as memes in the Monstercat comment sections or on the Reddit page before, so it was pretty funny. But in this time period, she had not done a lot of vocals for a lot of these songs. She took a break, kind of like Au5, for a few years, and then all of a sudden came back to do like some more vocals within this time period of 2019, 2020, and currently a little bit, but not as much as before. So anyways, let's get into Au5 song Eden, and we'll go.
Shades of blue colors, neon skies, you feel it, closer to danger, just a touch won't be enough.
Okay, right off the bat, you hear the introduction wub, like, and then you hear the pad playing, and then you hear Danyka Nadeau's vocals just come right in. And her vocals, much like Laura Brem's, are just really angelic sounding. I don't really know how else to say it. They're just really angelic sounding. So you kind of get this kind of euphoric feeling right off the bat listening to the song. So, and then eventually here you hear a little bit of percussion. So let's keep going. So it's interesting. Within the section, it introduces, in terms of percussion, a halftime rhythm, a kick, and then the snare. and then introduces the bass sound, which you hear like some subtle bass sound and movement on the bottom, which I like quite a bit in terms of playing along with the pads. There's like a chime sound in the background. Not sure if that's part of the pad, and then her vocals from Danyka Nadeau. So it's pretty interesting because this part switches to a more 4/4 rhythm with the percussion. So gives it a little bit more variation and energy within the section to build up. So let's keep going.
As sweet as you can taste it, beautiful danger. Just a touch won't be enough, 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 enough. Won't be
All right, within this section, it's interesting how the kind of euphoric bell chime feeling and ambience that slowly kind of phased out a little bit into the more synthetic sound of the bass that you hear from AU5. Kind of a little bit of a harsher bass, a dirtier, kind of more aggressive bass sound, but it's really smooth, so it fits in pretty well as a transitioning sound from kind of the more euphoric pad and bell sounds, which I found very interesting within this section. And the percussion of the kick playing on every beat actually makes you focus a little bit more on the kick and not so much on the transition between those kind of paddish euphoric sounds into that kind of bass sound. And the bells are pretty interesting within the section because they kind of alternate, and then there is a couple synth sounds he throws in that sounds similar to the bells. And knowing AU5, he constructs a lot of his own sounds, so even like an organic sounding sound he could make in the synthesizer, so that probably was a synthetic sound but sound really similar to a bell. So very interesting there. And overall, I like the introduction of the kind of bass sound, and then here it kind of fades out the pads and then goes into a more kind of synthetic ARP sound. So let's keep going. Okay, so that's the build-up section, and a more traditional build-up, but it's a little bit different because I was trying to figure out if that was a kick drum or a snare that was playing, because there was a clap playing as well, but I couldn't tell if that was like a top kick of a kick drum or if that was a snare being played like pretty fast and consistently. Because if that was a snare and a clap, that's interesting if those two sounds are paired together. I never would have thought to do that within the section. But anyways, some of the sounds used within the section, you kind of hear the bass sound on the bottom. You hear the arpeggiated pluck, but it also sounds like bells. So that's probably a synthetic bell sound AU5 made, and it plays really well into the kind of ambience and sound, because I think the pad is subtly still playing, because you still get that euphoric kind of sense of this song and the pads like from the beginning, and the vocals also help with them being so big with reverb and delay, and Danyka Nadeau's vocals sound pretty angelic or euphoric kind of saying, so definitely carries that feeling throughout into this build-up section here. And there was a little bit of a white noise VFX sweep, and then there's a breath of air here, and then you hear the vocal hook of I think Eden or something saying leading up into Eden, and then it just drops into the first drop. So we will get into this first drop now because it's going to be a fun one. Okay, so what I want to emphasize within this first part of the drop is the vocals, the use of him vocal chopping and including the vocals within the section. So he has a lot of vocal processing. He does kind of pitch some of the vocals down and then chops up some of the vocals within the section, which adds another kind of accent and calm response within this section, which is a really nice touch. So the percussion itself is in a 4/4 rhythm. um, I couldn't tell if it was traditional in terms of like starting off with just a kick drum and then adding the snare and the hi hats a little bit later, but I was really just focusing on the vocals and how they paired in terms of a calm response with the kind of wub sounds playing. And the wubs would play, and then the vocal chops would come in. Either it be like an actual phrase like of Eden, or just kind of different vocal chops in general of like syllables within the section, and they all follow a chord progression. And then you did hear sometimes at the end of phrases where there's like a synth playing like the last few notes of the chord progression in a different sound, like a more smoother synth sound, which is really nice. And that is, this section is probably the complextro drop, I guess you would say, and overall just really good. And it captures what AU5's electro was like in the past, and almost even like Fractal. You could kind of tell how Fractal and AU5 have very similar styles, because I mean, if you didn't tell me this was AU5 a long time ago, and like I didn't listen to this when it came out, I could have told you like, oh, did Fractal release a new song? So their styles are pretty similar. There are subtle differences with their sound design, but it's so similar that it's hard to tell at times. But anyways, this section, it transitions into the more melodic section. So let's keep going. Okay, so basically, this section is more melodic. You have Danyka Nadeau's vocals kind of in the forefront of the section, and they're more prevalent and present. The chord progression is playing, and then there are little wubs on the bottom at the end of certain measures to kind of accent kind of the end of the measure, which I like quite a bit. And then in the middle of this drop, I like how there's like a bell sound that comes in, like in place of the chord progression. It goes dun 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 and then transitions. I don't know, for some reason when I listen to the song, like I pick up on that section, maybe because all the other sounds kind of cut out and you hear those bells transition or play like a few different notes in a different synth and then transitioning into like back into the regular sound. So that's a very kind of complextro style thing to do, is to add in different elements and different sounds to all follow the same chord progression. So um, that was a really nice touch, and this whole section in general is really nice, really melodic, and I like how Danyka Nadeau's vocals are kind of in the forefront. And then to outro the section, you kind of hear the snare build up, and then you have the sounds kind of fade out, but the main sound you hear fading out is the like that's not really fading out, it's like the main sound, while the other sounds are fading out is Danyka Nadeau's vocals. It's still pretty prevalent. So then now it outros into this break section. All right, so you hear the glitching in this vocal now. There actually is a glitching in the synth within the section. You hear the bass section play a little bit. You hear the bells kind of playing. I don't know if that's part of the pad. You hear like a little bell synth playing, and then you hear some glitching, which is interesting because it that kind of background glitching sound leads into the vocals being glitched within this section. So it's a nice kind of tie-in and prelude to what you're going to hear in the vocals. So anyways, let's keep going. All right, so in this section, you hear the plucks come in, you hear the vocals glitching, but there is like a Foley like sound with, I don't know if it's like water dripping or something in the background. Nice, really kind of ambient sound. It's not in the forefront, it's more of a background sound, but it sounds kind of like Foley where it's actually like water dripping or something. Very interesting. So I just want to point that out quickly and we'll keep going. Okay, so it's interesting how the kick is playing in a 4/4 rhythm, and then you hear enough, basically repeated from Danyka Nadeau's vocals, and it's repeated actually into this build-up section as well. But there's like a kind of a ARP synth sound playing. I don't know if that's like a bass line in itself or like an ARP synth playing the bass line, but you kind of hear that play within that section, and then the vocals are slowly fading, like they're slowly getting louder with filtering, and then that sound too, and then it kind of cuts out, and the vocal is still saying enough, enough, and then it transitions into more of this kind of, I would want to say snare clap build up, but anyways, really nice section there, and I like the utilization of the kind of vocal chop and kind of repeating of the vocal enough in this section. So gives a little bit more variation, even though it is a little repetitive with the vocal, still some variation as opposed to the previous break and build up section. So let's keep going. Okay, so there is a different VFX sound this time. It's like it's not like a white noise sweep, like it's an actual kind of synth riser in a sense. Um, and I like how the vocal of "Won't Be Enough" is added into the sections, like the actual vocal, and then the vocal chop is still kind of processed a little bit, and being chopped. But you hear the original vocal halfway through the section, and then as it builds up and some of the sounds filter out, you kind of get that breath of air again. You get the vocal of "In the World of Eden," and then you'll hear what inspired Lost Without You, which is the kind of halftime drop in an electro song, which this is the part that was totally inspired by this song in Lost Without You. That second drop and chorus, totally inspired by Eden, completely, like structure wise, everything. So let's keep going. Okay, so that is the halftime drop, and you really do hear AU5 style in full display. You hear all the different sound design sounds, all the different call and response between those sound design sounds and the vocal chops. And there's something about a halftime rhythm, maybe because like the percussion isn't playing as often, the kick is playing on one, the snare is on three, that you hear a lot of the other sounds you don't hear if it's like a 4/4 rhythm or a double time rhythm with the percussion going a little bit more. You hear, and like the sound design sounds are really emphasized within the section. Like you hear everything, like the wubs, the vocal glitches and chops, the call and response between the different wubs and melodies playing, and different kind of like super saws being added in as like a response to the call of the wub, and the vocal chops as well, either being an accent or a response, which is so interesting within the section because I don't know, I think electro songs, after making Lost Without You and hearing this song, should have like a halftime rhythm, because complextro songs, there's a lot going on, and sometimes that 4/4 rhythm kind of covers up a lot of the wubs and sounds being played. But when it's like a halftime rhythm just for a short switch up, like you really do hear all those sounds. Like it's just, you hear everything. I mean, I could hear that a lot clearer than some of the other sounds in other sections. So anyways, let's get into this melodic drop and keep going. All right, so that was AU5 song Eden featuring Danyka Nadeau. The second drop pretty much is similar to the second part of the first drop, that second part of the second drop. Nothing too different. Structurally, everything was pretty similar. Same with the vocal and the lead and the chord progression. The outro is kind of what I want to focus on. The outro itself is really kind of euphoric, ambient. The vocals kind of play. It's everything has a lot of reverb, delay on it, and it's just really interesting to hear that because it's just a total contrast with no percussion at all. It just kind of fades out pretty organically within that section. So overall, this is AU5 song Eden featuring Danyka Nadeau, and they really do showcase in the song like what a complexo song kind of was in the past and like how it's evolved over time, but with a nostalgic sense. So this is the song I would say inspired Lost Without You, my collaboration with Eccentric, the most. And that second drop, the structure of the whole second drop is what inspired Lost Without You the most, I would say. But overall, that song was inspired by this whole song. And I hope I hear AU5 make more complextro and electro music in the future. But, you know, I'll take Eden I'll take a song like Eden every few years or just listen and go back to listening to Eden. So, anyways, if you guys haven't listened to AU5 or Danyka Nadeau's music, definitely check them out. And overall, I hope you guys like this video. This is a song I've been wanting to break down for a really long time. So I'm finally glad I'm able to do it and showcase it to you guys and tell you what the inspiration was for my song Lost Without You, because this is the song that inspired it the most. So anyways, like, comment, subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in the next A Producer's Approach video. All right, everyone, have a good one. Peace.